Okay, this recording is going to go over the answers to the questions on the pretest that you all have just taken. I'm going to go through these slowly. As you correct the test, I would like you to put check marks next to those things that you got wrong, and I would like you to put pluses next to those things that you believe you got right. Some of this is open to interpretation, so I will be going back over this myself. But what I would like to see is what you consider to be correct and what you consider to be incorrect. Some of the questions you'll just either get right or wrong, but particularly here on this first one, it's a little bit open to interpretation. So here we go. Question number 1 had to do with rabbits in a scientific investigation to find out what affects their hair color, and I asked you to explain why it would be inappropriate to use one Himalayan rabbit and one snowshoe hare, which is another kind of rabbit. I asked you to include a discussion of independent and controlled variables in an investigation. Here's the correct answer in front of you, or my version of the correct answer. Essentially what I said is that every investigation should change only one variable. In this case, the one variable they're changing, the independent variable, is the cold pack that has been placed on the back of the rabbit up here. Okay. All the other variables that might affect the data, like the species or type of rabbit, should be held constant or controlled, because those are the controlled variables. If you use one Himalayan rabbit and one snowshoe hare, there is no way to know if the color change is from the ice pack or from the species of the rabbit. That means that it would make it an inappropriate investigation. You can't tell. If the color change happened, is it because of the species? Is it because of the cold? You don't really know. So you should have had something like that. This one's actually worth 4 points, in my opinion, that you correctly said that there should be only one controlled variable, that you said that there should only be one independent variable, that the independent variable is the thing that they changed, that all other variables should be kept the same, including the species of rabbit, and that if you change two variables, you can't tell what the correct answer is. Page 2. In this example, we see a graph. I'm not going to explain why the answer is correct or incorrect. I really just want you to mark right now whether you got it right or wrong. The independent variable in that graph is temperature. The dependent variable is the number of bubbles per minute. The controlled variables. The two best controlled variables that you could have written based upon the paragraph above was type of plant and amount of time. I've written some other options in here, other things that you might want to control. Beaker of water, amount of sunlight, size of the plant. There are others. If you believe you put one that was correct, go ahead and put a plus next to it and I will check it. Otherwise, if you got it wrong, just put a little check mark next to it, and if you got it right, put a plus mark next to it. At the very bottom of this page, the temperature in which the enzyme changed shape is about 61 degrees Celsius. I would give you a 1 degree or maybe 2 degree range here. So if you said anything between, well, I wouldn't like nothing below 60, but you could say 60 up to about 63 degrees Celsius, and I would accept that as a correct answer. Top of the page, next page. Enzymes, B, lower activation energy, and are specific to one reaction. Identify the line on the graph above that represents the reaction with an enzyme. That's line B. In this example here, the best answers for proteins, that they are D. Carbohydrates are E, although you can put A for carbohydrates as long as you use A again in just a second. Lipids are B and A. You could maybe have included E there. Nucleic acids are C. Next page. In ecology, question number 4. I'm asking you to use words. So if you didn't write words in here, you didn't get it correct. And I was asking for the respiration equation. So oxygen plus glucose makes water plus carbon dioxide. They needed to be in that order. Now you could switch around glucose and oxygen on this side. That would be okay. or you could have switched around water and carbon dioxide on this side. That would also be okay. But you cannot have water or carbon dioxide over here or vice versa. In this one, you needed to use the equations. In this case, I asked for the photosynthesis equation. Carbon dioxide plus water, CO2 plus H2O, yields C6H12O6, which is glucose, plus oxygen. And they could be switched around this way, but they have to be on this side of the arrow. They have to be on the correct side of the arrow. Then there was a diagram, and I asked you to draw a food chain. So if you knew what a food chain was, and I asked it to have 4 trophic levels. That means 4 different organisms. It can be any 4. I chose oak, mouse, red-tailed hawk, and then the red-tailed hawk is consumed by the bacteria. The arrows show where the energy goes. You could have also done something like pine, pine borer, golden crown kinglet, hawk. There's not a right one, not a right or a wrong one there, except that it has to have 4. The arrows have to go in this direction. Okay, they have to go from the oak to the mouse or whatever the first 2 were. And they need on here to be accurate. So you wouldn't say, hawk goes to mouse. That would be wrong. Producer should go next to the plant. The first animal that eats a plant should be the primary consumer. The first animal to eat an animal, in this case the hawk eats the mouse, is the secondary consumer. And then whatever eats the secondary consumer is called the tertiary consumer. In this case, bacteria, even though it's smaller and is, just breaking down a dead hawk, which is what the bacteria is doing, it's still considered a consumer. Just because it's an animal doesn't mean it's not a consumer. Okay. Question 7 is C. For this one, I will probably have to grade this on my own. Here are some things that it could be that you could have included in there: cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, ribosome, mitochondria, rough endoplasmic reticulum, microtubules. There's many others. You could have drawn a plant cell, in which case you would have had the cell wall that you could have put in there, or chloroplasts. But I will probably correct this one on my own. I'm looking to see that you use the right letters here, and it'll kind of depend on which cell parts you chose to put on there. Next page. The correct answers here for the first 7 go A, B, B, A, C, A, A. Okay. Then in the genetics section, I ask what the genotypes of the man and the woman are. You should have capital A small a and capital A small a. Now if you chose to use a different letter, that's okay. So if you wanted to say use the letter N, you would need a capital N and a small n. Or if you used the letter G, you'd need a capital G and a small g. It has to follow that pattern. It does not have to be the letter A. But I chose to use the letter A because it's albino trait, albinism. You would set up your Punnett square this way. Capital A, capital A, small a, the 2 parents, and it would look like this on the inside. From this, you get 3 normal. Having a capital A makes you normal. That's 1, 2, 3 normal offspring, 1 albino offspring. So of every 4 offspring that these would have, any offspring, 75% chance that it'll be normal, 25% chance that it will be albino. The evolution question on the bottom, we see 3 pictures. I asked you to explain what was going on in each picture and to explain which traits are selected for or against. In the first picture, we see the population of mice. It has variation in terms of color. So it's of all the same kind of mouse, but there are white mouse and gray mice, but there's an equal number of each kind of trait. In the second picture, a predator is better able to spot the white mouse on the gray field, and they eat them first. In the third picture, we see there's still a population of mice, but most of the white mice are gone. White varieties have become less common because gray varieties are better able to hide. The environment has selected for gray genes. the traits that make the genes that make the trait of gray mice, and against the genes that make white mice. That's where they select for and against. Okay. Last page. This has to do with DNA and whether you understand how DNA fits together chemically. This is the strand of DNA that you got. These are the correct answers. Okay. I'm not going to go through each letter. Check your own. For each number 1, 2, 3, or 4, you either got it all right or you got it all wrong. So it's a plus or a check, plus or a check, plus or a check. And I'll pause it here and leave this on the screen so you can correct those.